program begins with Dramatic Overture by Austrian-American composer Erich Wolfgang KORNGOLD. Even to avid concertgoers, KORNGOLD may not be recognizable by name. However, I'm sure you've heard his music, especially if you're a fan of classic films. After beginning his career as a child prodigy, KORNGOLD and his family immigrated to the United States in 1943, where he would later transform the genre of film music. KORNGOLD wrote scores to films such as Captain Blood, The Adventures of Robin Hood, and many others. KORNGOLD eventually became an American citizen, and his work set the gold standard for the next generation of film composers, such as Bernard Herrmann and John Williams. KORNGOLD was a prodigy of unbelievable talents. He received major endorsements on his early works from composers such as Gustav Mahler and Richard Strauss. This piece, Dramatic Overture, is his first orchestral piece, which he composed when he was only 14 years old. The piece carries the maturity of a composer 3 times his age. Dramatic Overture encapsulates all of what KORNGOLD would later be known for in his film music. Colorful orchestration, soaring melodies, and unpredictable changes in tempo and character. Although this piece is not based on any particular story, this overture is begging you to unleash your imagination and let your own story unfold. American composer Samuel Barber is best known for his famous piece, Adagio for Strings. However, Barber's other numerous works are just as emotionally charged and beautifully written. If you're new to Barber, it's important to know that during his life he was referred to as a neo-romantic composer because his music makes deep emotional expression the focal point. Sweeping melodies, harmonies panging with grief, and long, intense symphonic build-ups all point backward to composers like Brahms, Schumann, and Tchaikovsky, who we will get to shortly. Barber's Piano Concerto, premiered in 1962, is a masterpiece in 3 movements. The first movement begins with a cadenza for the pianist, before launching the orchestra into action. The main allegro is centered around a pulsating, irregular melody which expresses deep emotional turmoil. As that anxiety relaxes, Barber brings us the second theme, which is fully introduced by the solo oboe. This melody perfectly demonstrates Barber's flair for romanticism. The second movement, titled Canzone, which is Italian for ballad, is one of the most lyrically stunning pieces written by Barber. It's an expanded version of a short work titled Elegy, a piece for solo flute and piano. It was later renamed Canzone and now shares that title with the second movement. Barber composed his Elegy for his friend and companion Manfred Eibel, a young German art student and amateur flutist. They must have been close because Barber dedicated the entire piano concerto to him. It's a wordless song, tenderly and mournfully romantic. Barber composed the first 2 movements of his piano concerto in 1960, but the third movement was not finished until 15 days before the premiere in 1962. Barber's close friend, composer Aaron Copland, visited him 16 days before the premiere and scolded him for putting the soloist, pianist John Browning, in such a terrible position. Barber, under extreme pressure, said, "I was terrorized into thinking of something which became the last movement." Barber's own terror and anxiety surely spilled over into the music itself. The entire movement is in 5/8 and at breakneck speed. I've given you 2 pieces by composers we don't hear often, so I decided to end the concert with an audience favorite, Tchaikovsky's 4th Symphony. Out of the 6 symphonies by Tchaikovsky, the 4th is my favorite because each movement has a completely distinct character and sound world. All the while, the entire piece is connected through the daunting fanfare of fate, which opens the entire symphony and returns at the end of the finale. Tchaikovsky said this declaration is a powerful warning of the fatal power which prevents one from attaining the goal of happiness. There is nothing to be done but to submit to it and lament in vain. At the time of the 4th, Tchaikovsky's marriage had just ended in a public disaster, landing him once again in a deep depression. The opening theme, a sort of slow waltz, seems to drift in like a mist from offstage somewhere, perfectly encapsulating this lamenting in vain. Despite all this doom and gloom, I believe that there was a large part of Tchaikovsky's spirit that was optimistic. We get a glimpse into this hope here at the climax of the first movement. We can literally feel the tug of war between fate and the human will. It's extraordinary. In the second movement, we hear Tchaikovsky's take on the same canzona, or ballad, which Barber used in his piano concerto. It's a love song, whose first verse is played hauntingly by the solo oboe, which is then answered with a second verse by the cello section. The second movement is a terrific example of just how much musical variety Tchaikovsky can create out of one simple tune. In complete contrast to the second movement canzona, the third movement is famous for its playful use of pizzicato in the strings throughout the duration of the movement. Just as a reminder, pizzicato is the Italian term used when the composer would like the players to pluck the strings of their instruments with their fingers instead of using the bow. The effect is adorable. Tchaikovsky lets the rest of the orchestra in on the fun, section by section. First, the woodwinds join with their sprightly tune, followed by the brass, who play their own form of pizzicato with very short, soft, lifted notes. The third movement ends gently, just as it began, which is a perfect setup for the lightning strike that opens the finale. This movement is a tour de force, showing off the full technical and expressive abilities of an orchestra. Tchaikovsky's use of Russian folk music ties the Fourth Symphony to his first three, which are very much inspired by the Russian folk tradition. All in all, the Fourth Symphony of Tchaikovsky is a fantastical dreamscape of deep emotion, which will leave you enriched, engaged, and entertained.